For years, many car enthusiasts believed that if you wanted a reliable and powerful small block, the Chevy 400 was the one to avoid. Nicknamed a heat-prone monster and branded the black sheep of Chevrolet's V8 lineup, it carried a reputation for being problematic. For decades, this engine was dismissed as a failed experiment, an oddball in the small block family that GM quietly moved away from. But nearly half a century later, the story looks very different. The Chevy 400 is being rediscovered, and instead of shame, it's now gaining respect. Modern engine builders are hunting down surviving 400 blocks as if they were rare treasure, unlocking their hidden potential to create compact, torque-packed builds producing well over 500 horsepower. An engine once ridiculed has now become a prized platform. So what really happened to Chevrolet's largest small block? Why was it shunned by the car community for so long? And how did a misunderstood design evolve into a resurrection icon in today's custom car world? By the late 1960s, Chevrolet and the rest of General Motors faced a new automotive era. Stricter emissions laws were looming, fuel economy was becoming more important, and buyers were shifting away from pure horsepower toward balanced, efficient performance. GM needed an engine that could bridge the gap, a power plant that offered the pulling strength of a big block, but still fit within the smaller, more versatile small block platform. Out of this challenge, the 400 cubic inch small block was born, making its official debut in 1970 as the largest displacement Chevrolet small block ever produced. Unlike the high-revving 302 or the well-balanced 350, the 400 wasn't designed to dominate the drag strip. Its true purpose was everyday usability, delivering strong low-end torque in heavier vehicles. Cars like the Impala, Caprice, Monte Carlo, Chevelle, and even station wagons and light-duty trucks benefited from its smooth yet muscular character. On paper, it was a smart compromise, offering drivers the strength of a big block without the bulk or fuel consumption. But achieving that displacement required Chevrolet engineers to push the traditional small block design to its absolute limits. With a bore of 4.125 inches and a stroke of 3.75 inches, the longest stroke ever used in a Chevy small block, the 400 achieved 6.6 liters of displacement. To make this possible while keeping the block compact, GM adopted a Siamese cylinder design, where the cylinder walls sat directly against each other without coolant passages between them. While efficient in terms of packaging, this design made the 400 more sensitive to overheating issues if cooling systems weren't properly maintained. This became one of the main reasons it gained a reputation as a hot-running engine. Beyond that, the 400 introduced unique parts that set it apart from the rest of the small block family. Its crankshaft was heavier, using larger counterweights, and required external balancing with a specific flywheel and harmonic balancer. This made part swapping, something Chevy enthusiasts loved about other small blocks, more difficult. For gearheads used to mixing and matching components, the 400 felt like an outlier, further fueling the stigma that it was unreliable or not worth the trouble. Yet when judged by GM's original intent, the 400 made perfect sense. It was never meant to be a high-revving race motor. It was designed as a torque-first engine, delivering smooth, effortless pulling power in big cars and trucks. While the 327 and 302 gave drivers screaming top-end excitement, and the 350 offered balance and versatility, the 400 carved its own identity. It was a workhorse, a low RPM powerhouse that could make a heavy car feel planted and confident on the road. In that sense, the Chevy 400 wasn't a failure, it was simply misunderstood. Today, many builders describe it as a big block in a small block package, compact yet strong, unique yet dependable when built right. What once made it controversial is now what makes it valuable. For many gearheads of the 1970s, the Chevy 400's unusual design wasn't seen as innovation, it was seen as a warning sign. Its unique cooling layout, special crankshaft, and reliance on specific components made it stand apart from other small blocks. But instead of being celebrated for those differences, it was often criticized. One of the loudest complaints was that the 400 had overheating issues. In truth, most of those cases came from underperforming radiators, clogged cooling systems, or poor maintenance, rather than any fatal flaw in the engine's construction. Still, once an engine develops a reputation, perception usually outweighs reality. Chevy enthusiasts were spoiled by the interchangeability of the 350, where heads, cams, and cranks could be swapped with ease. The 400, by contrast, demanded more precise parts, unique balancing, and extra effort,
To many in the car culture of the time, this inconvenience painted it as an outsider. Over the years, that stigma hardened into a myth. The idea that the 400 wasn't worth building, didn't belong in the small block family, and simply couldn't keep up with its siblings. Ironically, the reason it never fit the mold was because it was designed for a different role altogether. It was a hauler, not a racer. Yet enthusiasts continued to judge it as if it were meant to compete with the high-revving 302 or the versatile 350. By the late 1970s, the situation only worsened. New emissions rules forced General Motors to detune the 400, strangling its performance. Rising fuel prices discouraged buyers from large, heavy cars, the very market the engine was built for. At the same time, GM began focusing on newer, smaller displacement engines that better fit the downsizing trend. Slowly, the 400 was pushed into the background. Chevrolet dropped it from passenger cars after 1976, with a few last appearances in Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and GMC models through 1979, mainly in wagons and light-duty trucks. And then, without fanfare, it was gone. No updates, no second chance, no legacy push from GM. The 400 simply disappeared, as though it had never existed at all. But that wasn't the end of the story. What GM couldn't predict was that the Chevy 400 would eventually be rediscovered by a different generation, one armed with better technology and a deeper appreciation for what the engine truly offered. As aftermarket cooling solutions, performance aluminum heads, and stronger rotating assemblies became common, builders began to see the engine's so-called flaws as untapped potential. Its long stroke and big displacement, once seen as limitations, were now advantages. Customizers started boring and stroking 400 blocks into 406, 421, and even 434 cubic inch builds that delivered explosive torque and horsepower, often well over 500. Unlike the 302 that thrived on screaming RPMs, the 400 excelled at brute force pulling power right off idle, exactly what many drag racers and torque-focused builds demanded. Today, the 400 has earned a quiet cult following. Mid-tier racers, hot rodders, and custom truck builders are increasingly drawn to it because it's not flashy, it's effective. And thanks to modern aftermarket support, new 400-style blocks are being produced with stronger materials, allowing for 600 to 700 horsepower builds that still fit in a small block-sized package. The weaknesses that once made enthusiasts avoid it have been reimagined as strengths. The Chevy 400 was never a mass market star, and maybe that's why it's so compelling now. It wasn't built to win street races or to be a bestseller. It was designed with a purpose, and today, builders who recognize that are giving it the respect it was once denied. After decades of being overlooked, replaced, and even mocked, the 400 is finally being recognized not just as a misunderstood engine, but as one of GM's most versatile hidden gems.